here today. Here's what upsets me about the whole education formula is we know it discriminates against us. We know that. But yet when we complain to Beacon Hill, the response oftentimes is, but the people who benefit from it have the votes to keep it in place, and therefore we can't change it. You know what? That has to be the most ridiculous thing, the most un-American thing I've ever heard. We have the votes to keep discrimination in place, so therefore it should stand. No, it shouldn't stand, and that's one of the first things that we need to change. The second thing is this harbor. You look out the windows of this harbor and you see one of our most beautiful resources. I look out at this harbor and I see my work experience. I see the fishing boats that I've defended. I see the properties that I've developed. And yet the state looks at us and the state says this, Gloucester, you need to reserve your harbor for fishing. Then on the other hand, here's what they say. Gloucester, you're not allowed to go fishing. The state can't have it both ways. Either they allow us to go fishing, or in the event that they're not going to allow us, and I'm willing to bet my money on the fact that that's going to be the case, then we need to sit down and have a real discussion about what's going to happen here. And what we need to say is, okay, how much of this harbor are we going to dedicate to fisheries, and how much of this harbor are we going to expand into commercial, recreational uses? I feel that I'm prepared to handle that discussion for us at the State House with my years of defending these fishermen and with developing these properties. Now I want to turn to that line. He saw suffering and wanted to heal it. When I got into fishing and the fishing issues, my experience was my father's boat that, God bless him, he got hurt just before the boat that he was on sank. Had he not gotten hurt, he would have been on the fishing vessel Italian Gold, and he would have died with his 4 crew members. I watched 4 men die in one day. The second experience was, and Councilor Romeo's not here. We all know what tragedy happened to her husband, and that was a direct result of the regulations that were put upon that poor gentleman. Okay, I've watched people in this community die. There's real suffering. And the congressman's here. I shouldn't speak for him, but he knows where I stand on this. When fisheries policy becomes so important that the regulations fall on the policy itself, and it fails to take into consideration what the real effect is on the people that are risking their lives to go out to sea, we have a problem. We're working on it, and we're going to fix it, and I want to continue to work on it. Now let's talk about my generation for a second. I look around this room, I see Greg, I see Astrid, I see a couple of people my age, but quite honestly, we're in the minority. And one of the reasons I think we're in the minority is because a lot of people that I know that are my age had to move away. Why? Because they can't afford to live here. They cannot afford to raise a family here. The one way that the Chucky and the Christines and the Aunt Margarets of the world have gotten away with it is we live with family, we take care of our family, and we like that, but that doesn't work for everybody else. And why aren't those kids coming back even when they have kids and they want their kids to grow up with their parents? They're not coming back because the jobs aren't here to support the level of income that's needed to live here. So we need to develop our economy. How do I want to do that? I just talked about the harbor, that's one. Judith Hoagland is here. She's a big advocate of the creative economy. I want to connect the dots. I want to connect the dots between the artists, between the art institutes, and between those professions that are involved in design and architecture that all play a part in that economy. So that what we become is a fishing port, and in addition to that, we become a center of cultural tourism. We have it right here. We need to use it. We need to do it. The third part of it is business parks. The congressman said that there's 3 areas of our economy that's doing well. What are those 3 areas? The medical community. They're doing well. You drive up Route 128, you see Leahy building a new hospital, you see Beverly building a new hospital, you see Mass General they're doing well. The second part is the environmental. We hear about renewables. We want more renewables. Well, in order to get more renewables, we need to invest in companies that are doing that type of work. They're doing that type of work. They're growing. Let's have them here. The third part is the life sciences, stem cell research, in conjunction with our universities. It's happening, it's growing, let's have them here. And you're going to say, Margaret, where are you going to put them? You're not going to put them on the harbor, are you? No, we're not going to put them on the harbor. But the state has said that this property that we're looking at on the Magnolia-Manchester line, we need to look at that property, we need to determine if we can put business parks there, and if we can, we need to bring those industries here to Gloucester so people that graduate from college can afford to live here, raise their families, and continue to be Gloucester, Rockport, and Essex residents. Third, healthcare. Landmark legislation, we've done a really good job of covering 50% of the people, but 50% of the people that need coverage still aren't covered. And you might say, well, of course they're not, because it's going to be really expensive and it needs a lot of money. That's true. It does, but that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is we don't have the infrastructure to absorb all of those people. The biggest problem is there's a real challenge in how many primary care physicians do we need to treat those people. Suffering that needs to be healed. We need to, and this is what I would propose. I would propose looking at those students that are in the medical fields right now. We do this for teachers. You know what we do for teachers? States like Florida do this. They tell teachers that if they agree to teach in low-income areas, that the government will forgive their loans. We need to start looking at that we have the best medical schools here. We need to start looking at those folks that are in those medical schools, and we need to say to them, we need you to stay. We need you to make a commitment. And in exchange for that, we need to help you with your loans so you can afford to live here. Fourth, seniors. I sat on the board of senior care for over 6 years, so I was the secretary of the board. And one of the things that I worry about is the rising cost of water and sewer. Now, my parents are here. My mom, Frances, is blind through no fault of her own. My father, Joe, retired in order to take care of her. They are on a fixed income. I live with them to offset the rising cost of the bills and to make sure that my mom's cared for. I know what it's like when I look in the eyes of a senior who says, hey, Margaret, I don't know that I can afford to live in my house much longer because I'm watching a tax bill that's rising, I'm watching a fuel bill that's rising, and I'm watching a water and sewer bill that's rising. And yet my Social Security, it stays the same. How do I live here? And I'm not sure that we have all the answers, except that we have to get really good at advocating on the federal and the state level for those resources. One of the other things I would say is I'm intimately familiar with the consent decrees that have been issued. I served on John Bell's CSO task force as a representative who worked in the neighborhoods and also went to the Department of Environmental Protection to talk about some of those consent decrees in the order of compliance. And I think the mayor is onto something when she says when you look at those consent decrees, they stack right up against each other. Now, everybody knows that we all want clean water. I don't think there's anybody in this room that says, hey, Margaret, I'm going to raise my hand and tell you I don't want clean water. Of course we do. But the question is, how do we do it in such a way that we can afford it? Now, in my private practice, I represent homeowners, I represent waterfront business owners, I represent fishermen, I represent seniors. And it's not unlike when it comes to the waterfront property owners or the homeowners that I have to go up to DEP and negotiate with them. I know how to negotiate with DEP. I want to negotiate with them on the harbor issue. I want to negotiate with them on the water and sewer rate relief issue. Now, going back to Senator Kennedy's line, he saw war and wanted to stop it. How befitting on the one hand that statement was made in '68. How sad that it's now 2008, 40 years later, and it still applies. To see a war and want to stop it. And some of you may look at me and say, Margaret, you're running for state office. The war is federal. And I would disagree with you and I would say, no, it's not. Because every time you hit a pothole, you should realize how senseless the war is and all of the money that we're sending over there. When you see a child that looks at you and says, my school is falling apart, and you say, what did you do today? And he says, oh, I don't know what I did today, but I can tell you that the ceiling tiles fell. He's not learning. His school is crumbling around him. And the resources that would normally be put in education is being sent overseas for a war that nobody understands. Gas at $4 an hour, $4 a gallon. Again, senseless. And if you take all the economics aside and you push them over to the left and you look to the right, and when you watch the newscast, you see the names of the young men and women who are losing their lives. That right there should make us all stand up as citizens and say, enough is enough, and the war. We don't have to be elected to office to say it. We are citizens. Now, with all due respect to Congressman Canning, okay, to me, the most important title in this country is United States citizen. Okay?